Please be seated. In our endeavor to flee to God's kingdom, is there a particular roadway that we should use? Actually, just such a roadway is described for us in poetic language in Isaiah chapter 35. Thus, it is with keen interest that we await how Brother John Eckren, who serves as a member of the United States Branch Committee, who has 41 years of full-time service, will develop the theme of this next discourse, entitled, "Stay on the Highway of Holiness into God's Kingdom."
The title for this talk is Stay on the Highway of Holiness into God's Kingdom. And maybe when you looked over the program, you saw that it highlighted the scripture of Isaiah chapter 35 and verses 8 and 9. Let's open our Bibles and read that theme scripture. Isaiah chapter 35, verses 8 and 9. It says, "And a highway will be there. Yes, a way called the way of holiness. The unclean one will not travel on it. It is reserved for the one walking on the way. No one foolish will stray onto it. No lion will be there. No vicious wild beasts will come on it. They will not be found there. Only the repurchased ones will walk there." Well, maybe you have a few questions on this verse. For example, what is the highway of holiness? Who can use this highway? And how can we stay on that highway of holiness? Well, first of all, what is the highway of holiness that Isaiah was talking about here in verse 8? Well, to understand what Isaiah meant by a way of holiness, we need a little background. In the future, the Jews were going to be in captivity to Babylon. And it would seem to them that there would be no way out of that captivity. It didn't seem like they would ever get to go home. However, Jehovah was using Isaiah to prophesy that he would make a way out for them, a highway of holiness for them to return home to Jerusalem. Now, this first fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy came true when 50,000 men, along with women and children, were released from captivity in Babylon. Can you imagine that large crowd walking for 4 months to Jerusalem, and all the while imagining that their homeland would be returned to a paradise? Did you also notice there in Isaiah chapter 35, verse 9, that it said that no lion will be there, or no vicious wild beasts? See, Jehovah God was assuring them that he was going to protect them along the way, but only if they stay on the way of holiness. Now, does this prophecy have a modern day fulfillment? Yes, the highway of holiness is Jehovah's opening the way for us to leave Babylon the Great, false doctrines, and be protected along the way into God's kingdom and the literal paradise earth. Think of it this way. Spiritually, the world that we live in is like a large, dirty city filled with violent criminals, wealthy mobsters, and prostitutes. Can you feel how depressed and dejected you are with those surroundings? How bleak and dark you feel about life? Trapped with no way out. But then someone shows you a highway out of that city, and you visualize escaping out of that city and into the country, your new home. Clean air, green trees, beautiful crystal clear lakes. Would you not be grateful to someone who showed you that highway? Well, that's exactly what's happened to Jehovah's people today. Jehovah could see what a terrible spiritual state people were in, trapped in Babylon's doctrines of hellfire, immortality of the soul, predestination. I mean, really, we could say that these are filthy doctrines of demons. So in 1919, Jehovah's people were shown a way out, a highway leading out to God's kingdom, a way out of the filth of Babylon's false doctrines. And since that time, they have continued to cleanse that highway and leave the filth of those false doctrines behind. Well, who has been kind enough to show us the way? The Spirit-anointed ones have led the way, and they've even been thoughtful enough to go ahead of us and clear out that highway of anything that could stumble us. On this highway, Christians are at peace with Jehovah and with each other. But now, does this spiritual highway end once a person's left Babylon the Great and dedicated themselves to Jehovah? By no means. This highway continues to wind its way through the spiritual paradise that you and I enjoy today and into the literal paradise. Well, how do we know that? Let's go back to Isaiah chapter 35, and let's read verses 5 through 7. It's Isaiah chapter 35 and verses 5 through 7. At that time, the eyes of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. At that time, the lame will leap like the deer, and the tongue of the speechless will shout for joy. For waters will burst forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert plain. The heat-parched ground will become a reedy pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. In the lairs where jackals rested, there'll be green grass and reeds and papyrus. The lame running like a deer, the speechless being able to talk. How we rejoice to be walking on a highway of holiness to such a literal paradise. What a wonderful future. But now the second question we could ask is, who can use this highway? Well, you know, on many highways, especially here on the East Coast, you have to pay a toll to use that highway. Similarly, are there requirements for being on this highway of holiness? Yes, most certainly. If you look back again at Isaiah 35 and verse 8, it's called a way of holiness. And it says the unclean one will not be on it. And it's reserved for the one walking on the way, and no foolish will tread on it. Brothers and sisters, this is an important point. The highway of holiness is a holy lifestyle. It's a way of holiness. It's a way of life. Jehovah expects those who worship him to be holy, that is, clean, morally, physically, and spiritually. Now, of course, there are other people, agnostics and atheists, for example, that have left behind Babylon the Great's false doctrines. They've left the polluted city, but they're still not on the highway of holiness. Their lifestyle prevents them from access to the highway of holiness and its promised kingdom blessings. Well, that brings us to our third question. How can we stay on that highway of holiness? I mean, we qualify to be on the highway of holiness because we don't practice the works of the flesh. And we commend you for remaining morally and physically clean. Here in this convention city, you friends have represented Jehovah God very well. You don't smoke. You don't dabble in spiritism. You don't watch pornography in your hotel room. Hence, you are clean in flesh and spirit. You've met the requirements. You've paid the toll, so to speak, to enjoy safe and pleasant travels on this well-maintained highway of holiness. Yet, each of us does well to ask himself, am I traveling on the center of the highway? Or have I drifted towards the shoulder by not heeding clear direction, maybe on matters that might seem to us to be minor matters? You know, if you drift towards the shoulder of the road, you risk driving off the highway completely to our spiritual death. You know what I'm talking about. One minute you're driving down the highway, looking at the scenery, and the next minute you're driving down the scenery, looking at the road. Stay in the center of the highway. Look for signs that you're drifting towards the shoulder. Let's consider 7 examples of warning signs that could help us to see whether we're drifting towards the shoulder of the highway of holiness. First, being lazy physically or spiritually. Being lazy physically or spiritually. Proverbs 15:19 says, "The way of the lazy one is like a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is like a level highway." You know, I read one time that work is love made visible. So show Jehovah, your family, and others that you love them by physically working hard. What is meant by lazy spiritually? Well, you know you're straying towards the shoulder when you underline without thinking. Sit at the Kingdom Hall, but don't pay attention. Only study when you have to. Don't fall asleep at the wheel. Stay awake spiritually. Read our Bibles. Prepare for meetings. Read all the magazines. Push ourselves to meditate and think deeply about the Scriptures. Discuss spiritual matters with our family and friends in the congregation. Number 2, dating an unbeliever. Dating an unbeliever. 2 Corinthians 6:14 says, "Do not become unevenly yoked with unbelievers." Dating is with the idea of getting married. Do you want to get hitched to a car headed in the wrong direction? Many who have married an unbeliever have ended up in the ditch spiritually, or simply driven off the highway of holiness, never to be seen again. If you desire marriage, look for a mate that's on that same road and highway with you, has the same goals, and loves Jehovah more than you. Third, losing our temper, screaming at the family. Let's read together Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 31. It's Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 31. It says, "Put away from yourselves every kind of malicious bitterness, anger, wrath, screaming, and abusive speech, as well as everything injurious." The people we love are the ones we yell at. Why do we do it? Stress, imperfections, frustration. There is no good excuse. It is not acceptable behavior for one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It may not be seen by others outside your family, but Jehovah God sees it. Of all the people that we need to feel loved and loved by, is it not your husband, your wife, your family? Love with all your heart those who are closest to you. A fourth warning sign is being overly sensitive and easily offended. Let's read together Ecclesiastes chapter 7 and verse 9. Ecclesiastes chapter 7 and verse 9. "Do not be quick to take offense, for the taking of offense lodges in the bosom of fools." When someone hurts your feelings, forgive and heal right away. Can you imagine if you had on your body every scratch and bruise that you had had since a child? Can you imagine what you would look like? Can you imagine how you would feel? Well, some people are that way emotionally. They keep every bruise and cut and scratch they've ever had. Don't be that way. Jehovah gave our body the ability to heal, and spiritually and emotionally, he's also given us that ability and the spiritual help through the scriptures to do so. Heal, forgive, slow down and think about your response. Don't be quick to take offense. Take your foot off the gas of pride. Fifth, entertaining immoral fantasies. James chapter 1, verses 14 and 15 warns us about what can happen if we entertain immoral fantasies. It says, but each one is being tried by being drawn out and enticed by his own desire. What we think about feeds what we do. And we've had a lot of warning signs about this one. Immoral fantasies are in books, movies, pornography, and magazines. An old Cherokee chief was teaching his small grandson about life, and he described it as a fight going on inside of me, he said to the boy. It's a terrible fight, and it's between two wolves. One is evil and the other is good. And then he told his grandson, this same fight's going on inside of you and inside of every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a minute and asked his grandfather, well, which wolf will win? The old chief simply replied, the one you feed. Which wolf do you feed if you entertain immoral fantasies? Our sixth warning sign, developing a materialistic spirit. Let's read 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. It says, do not love either the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Because everything in the world, the desire of the flesh, the desire of the eyes, and the showy display of one's means of life does not originate with the Father, but originates with the world. Furthermore, the world is passing away, and so is its desire. But the one who does the will of God remains forever. Money, money, money. Everything these days is about money. It's become who they are, how they keep score, the definition of success or failure, even their self-worth. But did you notice what verse 17 said? Who would remain forever? Those who are doing the will of God. That's something to think about, brothers and sisters. Who will remain forever? You know, how much of this stadium do you think would be left if we came back and saw it in 100 years? Or 10,000 years? Or let's make it really big. Let's say we came back here in 1,000,000 years. How much of this stadium do you think would be left? But did you know that you could make an arrangement with anyone here and say, I'll meet you in 1,000,000 years? What does that tell us about where to put our emphasis? On things or on people? Number 7, failing to cultivate the fruitage of the Spirit as listed at Galatians 5:22 and 23. When we fail to cultivate the fruitage of the Spirit, it's literally like taking our hands off the wheel while we're driving. It's a disaster. Driving is constantly readjusting. If we take our hands off the wheel spiritually, it is also a disaster. Instead, we need to keep our hands on the wheel spiritually. Constantly steer ourselves towards greater love, joy, and peace. Check our mirrors for kindness, goodness, and mildness. Accelerate with greater faith and press on the brakes of patience and self-control. Now, these are just 7 warning signs, but there are many others that we may personally be thinking about to warn us when we're getting too close to the shoulder. Let's review. What were our 3 questions? What is the highway of holiness? It's Jehovah's opening the way for us to leave Babylon the Great's false doctrines and be protected along the way to the spiritual paradise in God's kingdom now and the literal paradise in the future. Who can use this highway? Only those that worship Jehovah and who are clean physically, morally, and spiritually. And third, how can we stay on the highway of holiness? Don't stray to the shoulder of the road. And most certainly, don't get fooled into taking any exits. We love God's kingdom, and we all want to be there to see the benefits that God's kingdom is going to bring to planet Earth. Stay on the highway of holiness, brothers and sisters, until the kingdom's purpose is fully accomplished and Jehovah becomes all things to everyone.